ようございます。今日は楽しみですね。じゃあ始めましょう。Yeah, I still masturbate while eating top ramen at a faster rate. The quantities it counts as weight when I'm slurping at this unbelievable pace. I turn the temperature up all the way to sweat up on my face. If you give no effort, if you got no money, then you got a cheap method. Crack it open, throw it in a pan and let it cook. Baby, now that's a real education. Fuck books. If you wanna make it, acknowledge all the flavors that be dropping mad knowledge on these pussy ass canned goods. We got chicken and beef to boost the manhood. Anybody want a piece of me? We'll have to get this ramen first. Start with the shrimp and then the fire. You can blaze and this shit'll get you higher. 35 cents a pack, 3 for $1. Unbelievable pricing. That's the future of a blue collar worker. And I'm talking about ramen. The shit'll fill you up when you're feeling like an African. Come back to me with the state that I'm in and say hi to my homeboy Top Ramen.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So today we're actually going to go ahead and talk about the Magpul BAD lever again. So this is sort of a re-upload over the last video that I did that talked about it at various different angles of approach and that kind of thing. Mostly just because this one's better. So there's going to be a bunch of little demos in this. A couple of them are actually pretty slow, and I could say that they're deliberately slow just so you could see what I'm doing. I just didn't feel like moving faster for them, being honest. That'd be a one-handed type 3 stoppage clearance, and also rolling around the ground for, honestly, fairly obvious reasons, especially when you see it. It's pretty warm out here, and I was wearing just all the dumb gear and that kind of thing. Mostly to show, okay, yeah, you can do it with all this junk on. So, let's go ahead and talk about this, right? So, the Magpul BAD lever. Now, there's a bunch of people that, frankly, don't have a lot of experience with this and act like they do, or believe that they have got an impression on it or whatever, and they just declare it unsafe to use, or it makes them feel uncomfortable to use and that kind of thing. And one of those people was me. Some years back, I did a review on this particular thing, okay? And frankly, it's just because I've seen enough people do dumb things with them, and I just kind of wrote it off. That was my opinion. Didn't care to use it all that much. And then I started talking to the right people, and we're like, yeah, there's a smart and a dumb way to use it. I started actually using it, and okay, now I got to reevaluate my position on it. So, aside of a quicker reload, there's actually a lot of different things that you can do, actually significantly better with it. And the first one that just comes to mind, the easiest, and especially since I'm a natural southpaw in the first place, is that this is actually pretty good ambi control. So, I mean, if I have to, lock action in the rear and that kind of thing, that's just easy to do because there's a giant friggin' lever in the way. And is it like preposterously easy compared to pressing on the little tiny dingus in there? If you're a trained natural southpaw, no, that's not a big deal. But honestly, it's just a little better. So a little better does help, and it sets in a more natural position and that kind of thing for me. So that's kind of a big deal, at least for me anyhow. Just because I like easier things. And if we're talking about dropping a bolt on a magazine or whatever, it's pretty easy to do. You just keep your digits and whatnot essentially pressed against the magazine well. You slide along the fencing and you're set with your thumb for basically ever. That's a big deal because I like a full set of ambi controls, and frankly it's for two reasons. One, if you plan on not shooting on your wrong side or your opposite side, whatever your strong side is, if you plan on not doing that ever or hardly ever, you're kind of accepting weakness, and to me that's pretty friggin' lame if we're talking about fighting in general. The other is, look, man, like if I gotta go over to a side that feels retarded, for instance, if I was natural right-handed and I gotta go lefty, whatever feels less alien, whatever is just a little bit easier to use, I kind of want. Okay, so, I want the safety levers there, I want the magazine release and all that junk in place, just because, it's just easier. And easier, to me anyway, is better, as long as it doesn't come with crazy cons. And I don't really see any on this. So here's the thing, right? Let's get to the big thing really fast. If we're doing right-handed stuff, and especially if we're doing reloads or whatever, right? There are a bunch of people here, and again, myself included, that just kind of have their opinions on this because they've seen a couple of videos of dummies doing dumb things on the internet, or they've seen it in person, and they just decided, okay, well, that's unsafe, and that's the extent of their experience. And again, like I said, I've learned things. So here's the deal. There's a right and a wrong way to use this. And the wrong way to use this is every time that you go and press on this individual switch, if you're pressing it like it's a button, point of the finger trying to press the thing, okay? Especially if you got a safety off and that kind of deal, which there are reloads that, you can do with safety off or on, whatever your friggin' preference is. Point is what makes this unsafe, industrial air quotes, for some folks is this motion, because if they're going fast enough, especially if they're trapped like so, like it's not as big of a deal if we're up here. However, if we're in a trapped position like so, like for instance, if I'm just friggin' tired, okay, or if I'm in some sort of dynamic position or whatever, yeah, and of course I would fail to lock that up 3 separate times because apparently I can't lock a charging handle today. This is where they run into trouble, because when they're pressing on this directly with like a point of a finger, that's when, and especially if they're like moving fast or whatever, that's when you get that kind of issue, right? So that is essentially the exact wrong way to use that. Now the right way to use it, you can actually see where I mark this on the fencing of that magazine release there, is if I'm in that spot and I'm going to press that magazine button, or if I'm just setting in a regular position, right? Like bolts closed, I'm ready to shoot and that kind of stuff. I'm sort of pronated out or curled out on that piece of magazine release fencing. And honestly, that's for 2 reasons. One, I have my reference here, whether or not it's cold, whether or not it's hot, whether or not I got gloves on, okay? And the second is if I have other things to do, I can dodge everything. That includes this. I can dodge everything. I can operate controls and all that. And lastly, I like ambi controls, so I'm out of the way of my safety lever and I can just take the thing off. And enough people have seen this enough times to where they've asked me questions as to why I'm using full-length safety levers and why it's not getting caught. So that's a tiny detail there that really helps out, number 1. Number 2, when you actually go to press on this, okay, you're in this position, you get your reload in, you go to insert your new magazine, and right when you go to insert your new magazine, okay, instead of pressing on this with the point of your finger, straighten out and the edge of that index finger overrides, okay, what's essentially the outside of your magazine well, and you can actually see where my hand tracks on this receiver over and over and over again, so that you have a reference for that index finger that's safe. And essentially, you're bowing your index finger opposite, okay, of how it naturally curls, so that you're pressing on the thing, and even when it's slightly more difficult, and that's with just an empty magazine versus trying to chamber around, you can actually see how easy that is to curl over, because all you're doing is straightening out using the meat of that finger. And that's how that goes. And again, there's going to be some more demos of reloads and that kind of stuff. But that's what gets you out of trouble basically all the time. Because even if you're in a trap reload like so, and you go to get another magazine here, if you're using that same motion, you're not in trouble basically ever. And let's say that I have to lock the action to rear on this thing for pick a reason, right? All this really is you bow it all the way out, catch that, and then you're just picking up with your finger. Now, some people are not as big of a fan of that. Personally, I'm not. Mostly because it's just a really awkward movement for my index finger. But there are a lot of guys that just burn the house down with it, so it's not really that big of a deal. But if you're not a fan of that, this is still a giant friggin' lever on the other side, and it helps out with, just locking the action or rear and doing whatever. So it's pretty easy to figure out there. Now, because of essentially that lack of understanding that you're going to hear from a lot of people on the interwebs and that kind of thing. And no, I didn't figure this out like last month. Obviously, I did a video on this well over a year, like 2 years ago, something like that. I've been given this plenty of time. I've had this on plenty of guns, plenty of different seasons, plenty of different weather types and all that. Definitely put it in under some weird circumstances where I'm curled up in a tiny little ball to see if there are any problems that can result from using it. And I've found out that it's the exact opposite that's true. For instance, if my hands are really cold, I've heard this before. And I never really had this opinion on it, but I've heard this before from folks, you know, is friggin' www.imright.com, the bad lever sucks, whatever that forum is, right? So, you know, if your hands are cold, like real cold, you're not going to have enough, like, dexterity to press the thing. I find that when I'm real cold, whether or not I have gloves on, okay, that pressing this down and avoiding that is actually a little bit easier because I'm in more of a frozen position like so, and it's more of a... Versus, I've had trouble before, and I'm not saying that it was impossible, but I felt the concrete hands where I've inserted like so, and I'm either sliding all the way up, or I had like a complete grip on here because I can't undo my hands because it is actually that friggin' cold, or I'm also wet or whatever. And while this can be done, right, okay, while this can be done, and while it can be done with not really any difficulty, you know, you just feel your hands as cold as they are trying to resist you. And again, is this a problem? No. I've done like a million cold weather reloads, and I've done them while also soaking wet from the kind of winters that we have here in Kentucky, which is just wet and awful most of the time instead of snow. So, I found it honestly easier, just because whether or not I had gloves on or whatever, you know, it's just less for my hands to do, right? Because even on the insert or whatever, okay, like let's say, you know, I am that cold, everything's moving slow, I hate my life, but once I'm up here, there's just less for my hands to do overall, which helps me. So, you know, that is what it is. And another thing that a lot of people really don't talk about, honestly, is how much this helps everybody on the stoppage clearance side of the house, especially the Type 3. Now, you know, whether or not that's a failure to feed, a really barred in there failure to eject, or a failure to extract where you actually have to make sure that the case, like, you know, gets ripped out of the gun and that kind of thing. When you're one-handed, and I know this is a niche, but if this has to happen and you only have one hand, you have a lot of problems already. I noticed that this just makes it way, way easier to just get in here, press on this giant friggin' lever with what little hand I have left, and I don't have to overextend and you know, press on it with a pinky, and you know, you have to put in the extra force to make sure that it actually stays down and all that jazz. So, I mean, for me anyhow, okay, it makes life significantly easier. As far as, you know, breaking the gun down on a regular two-handed Type 3 and that kind of stuff, again, it's not crazy, but it is a little bit cleaner. It is a little bit faster to get that bolt lock to the rear this way. And lefty, holy shit, it, to me anyhow, it just feels stupid fast. You know, anytime that I've got stuff to do here, I don't have to really worry about anything. I can just straighten out this whole index finger, pin the whole thing down, cycle it, and we're good to go here. So there's that. Now, there are a couple of concerns that I've had over time, and I need to see if there was like any real issue with it. I have said in the past that I'm sort of concerned about this being like a snag point and that kind of thing. I've mounted this to enough guns, been in the field a million times. You know, the kind of field where like every 2 seconds you're losing a patch because some branch rubbed against you and it ripped something off. That kind of shit. And at no point ever, I mean ever, have I ever been snagged on something. I was like, oh crap, that's my dingus, right? So I haven't gotten my dingus caught on any branches as far as all that's concerned. Which honestly, that, you know, that kind of settles that point, at least in my mind anyhow. So I've been asked this question a bunch of times, or people have tried to reference like different types of a bad lever and that kind of thing. Um, so like X company makes Y, like type of copy or clone or their take on it or whatever. And generally speaking, I actually really do not like those at all. And it's mostly for a couple of different reasons. Number one, there's a lot of different iterations of them that'll extend further out, right? Like just sitting normally, or when the action is locked to the rear. I have this thing, it's sitting way further out. And what's usually worse about those as well is I really hate the square-faced ones. I'm not a fan of those for multiple reasons. Number one actually does have to do with like gloves and shit. So if it's a non-rounded surface, if it's square, that's gonna snag on things like gloves. And I've seen those before. I've used them, and I don't like how if I have heavier gloves, because let's say it is actually that cold outside. So let's say I have, my thing locked to the rear, and I have heavier gloves on, and I have the square edges that are sticking out further than a Magpul bad lever normally is. And the issue that I have with it is the larger gloves will snag up on the right angle, on the right angular face of a lot of these things. And the second I go to press on that magazine release, just the extra material on the glove will catch on the right angles of that and drop it. And now I have to do extra things, and I'm just not a big fan of that. So, as far as all that is concerned, I'm just not a huge fan of those. I've seen a lot of different variants of them, the enlarged ones, the extra large ones, that kind of shit. And I'm just not a huge fan of it. I'm also aware of basically the same damn product, only it replaces your entire bolt catch. I like the idea, generally, and I like it in principle, right? Because if you're a fan of it and you don't want the wiggly thing, then okay, just replace your whole friggin' ping pong paddle. And the reason why I don't use those, frankly, is I'm still using military rifles a lot, and if, let's say that I'm actually, bringing things to add to a military rifle, that's where a bad lever really comes into play for me, because I can just pull that off of the gun that I have, and I can put it on one of those. So, is that a real reason to hate, like, the complete bolt catch replacements? No, it's not. They're pretty neat. I just like to be able to pull things off of guns that I currently have and put them on other stuff. So, and the last one is, over time, this guy right here will start to wiggle independently of the actual ping pong paddle. Now, right now, it's just taking the ping pong paddle with it because it's new. But I have had these old enough to where they would just kind of like rotate a little bit independently of the ping pong paddle, like, and I've gotten questions where it's like, yo, the screw is like definitely tight. It's definitely tight, and it's still rotating. It really bothers me, and I wanted to see if there were any problems with that. And turns out there really isn't. It functions exactly as it's supposed to. It makes my OCD friggin' explode, which is why I have a new Magpul bad lever on here instead of the old one that moved all over the place. But other than that, there's really, there's no functional issues there whatsoever. The only one that could possibly sort of be an issue is like the tiny amount of noise that it makes extra. If you're in that arena and that matters, there you go. But other than that, there aren't really any downsides. So the last one that I hear is, I've never been a believer in this personally, and frankly, when I hear this point, to me it just kind of strikes me as foolish, because you could say this about a million other different things. But okay, so like guys that get really, really used to this, will just suddenly be worse without it. No. Just no. If you're concerned about it, get a couple of extra reps and just no. If you're a lefty and you got to do the old shebang instead of pressing a thumb, it's not a big deal. And if you're right-handed and you got to press the thing, you just get a couple extra reps in. It's really not that big a deal. Stuff like that is blown away out of friggin' proportion anyway, because, you hear stupid things like, oh, well, you'll do worse with, if you suddenly don't have that on your gun, ha ha ha. It's like, yeah, because the other way's slower. Maybe not by much, but it is. You know, just like dummies that say that, hey, well, if you take a red dot off your pistol, you'll be worse with those irons. Yeah, it's the better sighting system. You know, so just dumb things like that. And frankly, the idea that I have on that more than anything else is, if you suck, you suck. Do something about it, and then it's not a problem. Night vision, awesome. Full stop. That is all. I just have fewer things to do. Everything that you're doing when it's like dark, like actually dark, like your white phosphorus night vision has a problem seeing in the dark. It's friggin' dark outside. It's all a feel game. I'm telling you, it's just different. And, you know, people that are going to hop on Reddit or I'mRight.com and start typing a thesis on why I'm wrong about this and how it's not just a feelsy game in the dark, I guarantee the extent of their night vision experience is, ooh, stars, and wow, I can actually see in my living room. That's it. So, now, you know, having everything in the dark, not being able to see, and everything being a feel game, man, this is just awesome. It's just awesome. There's fewer things to do, and I have fewer things to think about, because even if I gotta lock actions to the rear or whatever, like I said, it's not a friggin' problem. So, you know, that is what it is. But for those of you that found this interesting or have never seen my take on this before, you know, I hope you learned something, and I hope I helped you out. If you want to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. I have stuff posted through September at the moment. I work off of military schedule and that kind of stuff because I'm still doing that freaking thing. I guess I'm going to finish to 20. I got 5 years to go. So there's that. But I got stuff on the schedule out through September. You know, private classes are a thing. They've been a thing, and there's more than one that I'm doing from here to, and man, you guys are trying to take up like my random Tuesdays, which again is fine. It just means I'm busy now. So there's that. If you want to check us out on Facebook, you absolutely can. And if you want to help us out, you know, with either throwing a super thanks into the thing for like a couple of bucks or whatever, or jump on a Patreon and do that, that absolutely does friggin' help us. It allows us to do the kind of stuff that we're doing, especially for trying to be all over the place, teach and that kind of nonsense, as well as the YouTube stuff. So, you know, supporting us that way absolutely friggin' helps. And just, I'm eternally grateful that I'm able to do this kind of stuff, living a dream. So, you know, and if you want to get something out of it, $41 a month gets you as much training as you could stand with us. Unless it's something like a private class or like a vehicle class, and that's just like logistics based and that kind of shit. Other than that, it's a system meant to be abused. Links for all of this, website, Patreon, and Facebook, are all in the description below. And I also do a nerd channel. It's been a while since I posted something on it last because it's like a hobby channel, but if you want to see us do turbo nerd things, link for that is in the description below. Also, the channel name is The Blue Falcon Guard because I'm a turbo nerd, and the initialism of that needed to be BFG and Blue Falcon and blah, blah, blah. It's a place for me to be stupid, so let me have my fun. Other than that, guys, remember, regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Easy.